Hey, do I look like a Democrat? No? Well, how about now?
Illuminati is a thing you need to watch out for. They want to depopulate and slave us so much more. World domination, I'll get into that later. I'm hardcore, fierce and sexy. You're just a hater. You deserve the ridicule because you're an absolute zero. I'm the keeper of the chalice, a rock and roll hero. I'm not an idiot nobody listens to, because I'm not a failure in life like you. Let's talk about the gates and the mark of the beast and the orgies in the streets at the Catholic feasts and Bill and Hillary's human trafficking ring. And George Soros got the money to pay for everything. Socialism is for losers, working for the devil, chumps that can't fight, they ain't on my level. It takes an evil one to try to debunk and doubt it, so I'd rather die than stop talking about it. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. Watch out for the Illuminati. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. Watch out for the Illuminati. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. Watch out for the Illuminati. Watch out for the Illuminati.
You know, when I look out and I see all the real Americans, I think about how Donald Trump, his family was compromised. When I look out there and I see Donald Trump, I think about how his business was compromised. But what happened last week when they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next President of the United States? Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
Welcome to the MC Too Tall Show. I, of course, am your hardcore, fierce, and sexy host, MC Too Tall. Drinking a large coffee from Wild Bagels. There. Now, you could pick up a fine coffee like this at Wild Bagels, 1901 Stillwell Avenue, and check out their delightful array of bagels. Or you could give them a call at 718-333-WILD. That's 718-333-WILD. And remember, Wild Bagels. Those bagels sure are wild. The fit. I'm wearing a shirt with the likeness of somebody who is now deceased, who would have voted for Donald Trump, who would have openly supported Donald Trump if he was still alive. And I say the same about Kurt Cobain, and I would say the same about Randy Rhoads. And a lot of people out there might look at this video and say, oh, you don't know that, you don't know that, because they love these rock legends but hate Donald Trump. So they'll either say, oh, he would have hated Donald Trump, or you don't know that, you don't know that. But what we do know is where Hulk Hogan stood with regards to Donald Trump. And let me tell you something. Famous people who have conservative values, it's not a detriment if a famous person has conservative values. It is an attribute. Shout out to James Woods, Scott Baio, to John Voight, to people like that. And I could go on. Sylvester Stallone, Rob Shapiro, Rob Schneider. I could go on. And so I see it as an attribute, not a detriment. Although I do respect political neutrality. Political neutrality does earn my respect. Like somebody like Denzel Washington, for example. He managed to keep his political affiliation under wraps throughout his entire career and still does to this very day, and shuts down interviewers who try to politicize any interview that they try to conduct with him. And lots of respect to him for that. Now, I personally have a different feeling about how he raises his kids, but I don't want people to look towards me with all my power and influence and see that as something to gauge whether or not they should continue to support Denzel Washington and his movies. Don't suddenly blatant non-support for Denzel just because of my personal feelings about how he raises his kids. I mean, I do respect his political neutrality. And another person who's a little late to the party that now recently decided to, on the surface, be politically neutral was Dwayne Johnson, who you might know as The Rock. You might know him as that. Now, in 2020, he was all in for Joe Biden. He endorsed Joe Biden. But having seen what Joe Biden was capable of as president, or lack thereof, he was quick to jump into the political neutral camp. Then you have people who do put a detriment on their legacy as an entertainer. People like Robert De Niro. People like Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen DeGeneres, Whoopi Goldberg. And I could go down that list. Cher, Madonna, Kathy Griffin, and one Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert, because of his blatant attacks against a duly elected American president, a two-time duly elected American president, has lost ratings by these dramatic numbers. I mean, his ratings kept plummeting year after year. He started losing sponsorship. And what NBC charges for ads, boy oh boy, it's horrendous. What CBS charges is horrendous. And Stephen Colbert worked for CBS, whose parent company is Paramount. And it seems like because Paramount paid Donald Trump money, or not Donald Trump, but his camp money, for falsifying that Kamala Harris interview, putting up the somewhat bearable answer versus the incoherent babble answer that she put out for certain questions on 60 Minutes there, which was supposed to be like the news magazine. This was something that was of legendary status, 60 Minutes, with legends like Harry Reasoner and Mike Wallace. And it got relegated to cutting and pasting and editing Kamala Harris interviews. So they got sued. I believe they either lost in court or they paid a settlement, but either way they coughed up money, and Stephen Colbert was pissed. And it was planned for a while that his show would get the axe. And that show got the axe because of him. And he decided to get lewd and flip the bird and say all kinds of profanities. If you're going to say a profanity, be classy about it. Be like Scott Baio and put an X post out there that says something that we could all agree with, or any normal person could agree with, which is, fuck Joe Biden. But anyway, here we are. Stephen Colbert had the plug pulled on him. He had his TV turned off, proverbially. And other late night hosts like Jon Stewart and Jimmy Kimmel are outraged about it, because the propagandist arm of the Communist Party has been weakened yet again. The propagandist arm of the Communist Party has been weakened yet again, because that uncivilized, etiquette deficient, uncouth, piggish slob, Stephen Colbert, was taken off the air. And so now that heavy load of having to sell the dream that Donald Trump is a racist, child molesting Nazi, which is everything the Democrats are, now rests on the shoulders of them. Rests on the shoulders of Kimmel. It rests on the shoulders of Stewart. And it's sickening, yo. You know, and then you have Bill Maher, who still likes to think of himself as a classic liberal, which no such thing exists anymore. I don't even think Dave Rubin is calling himself that anymore. And if he wants to hit me up to correct me if I'm wrong, he's invited to do so. I doubt he'll even see this broadcast. But what exactly is a classic liberal in 2025? Your example of a classic liberal is Chuck Schumer, which is an old man relegated to having to parrot the radical talking points and to gaslight and to make people believe that they are excited or should be excited that Kamala Harris ran for president. I mean, they're getting more and more pathetic as they get more and more desperate and grasp at straws, and the evil in them comes out more and more by the day. And it's coming out that it wasn't Donald Trump or the Russians that sabotaged the 2016 campaign. it was Barack Obama and his administration that attempted to flip the campaign. And when they found out they weren't successful, that's when the Steele dossier that they knew was false was pushed as legit investigative material to go after a duly elected President Donald Trump. December 9th, 2016 is a date which will live in infamy. That is the day an attempted coup had started. What happened on that day, December 9th, 2016, is far worse. Is far worse than anything that happened on January 6th, 2021, barring, of course, the unlawful and uncalled for shooting death of Ashley Babbitt. There were criminals in the White House performing criminal activity. And this is why I say it. Crime runs rampant because of the Democrats. And now you know why. Because the Democrats themselves are criminals. And I'll say this again. So many levels of hell where belong the left. And you see it. You see it. And isn't it poetic justice that the person bringing this to light is a person that has held the seat, that now holds a seat that was once held by one of these co-conspirators. Speaking of Russian collusion, she was falsely branded a Russian asset, or as Joy Behar would say, a useful idiot for the Russians. And of course I'm talking about DNI Secretary Tulsi Gabbard. And I'm glad she's the one bringing this to light. Because as I said, it's poetic justice. It is poetic justice that these criminals are now hopefully going to have their day in court. We just got to hope Pam Bondi does not drop the ball on this one. Because, to be honest, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on this, her tenure as Attorney General isn't as great as we've all expected it to be. There might be a need for some cabinet shuffling. He might have, Trump may have to move Rubio and Bondi's spot and then find a replacement for Rubio as Secretary of State. Or maybe he brings up Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, who did put in some time as a successful lawyer and congressman prior to being governor of Florida. But the future remains to be seen. We haven't seen Pam Bondi drop the ball on this particular thing yet. Is she dragging her feet? Seems like it, but we have a certain timeline. Everybody knows that timeline and that deadline when we want to see something. We want to see one of these co-conspirators sitting in a courtroom fighting for dear life in a hearing. A trial for their life. We want to see these people sweating at a witness stand in hopes they're not dragged off into a dungeon. And then, if found guilty, dragged off to a dungeon. We cannot settle for anything less than that. We need to see somebody. We need to see somebody be held accountable and pay their debt to society. Because if not, why do we even have a Justice Department? Why should we have a Justice Department where under a Democratic president, it's okay to label people with opposing political views as domestic terrorists, spy on them, batter down their doors, drag them out in cuffs? In the case of poor, sweet, innocent little Ashley Babbitt, shot and killed. But when under Republican leadership, be too weak to move a muscle. What would be the point of a Justice Department other than to weaponize it against regular people, normal human beings, people who actually count as people because they have conservative views and conservative values? We got to see some heads rolling. We got to see some heads rolling. Rolling, 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 rolling. Because what the Justice Department did and what the investigative community did under Barack Obama and Joe Biden was ungodly. Ungodly indeed. And on to my loyal John Crancians watching this show, I say, respect God, watch out for the Illuminati, follow and share this content, tell all your friends about me. Always, always, always be sure to shame and defame the gross. Stay strong, keep kicking that slang. It's your boy in the building. Hip-hop legend, recording engineer, underground rock and roll hero, and famous influencer, MC Too Tall. Be safe out there. Be safe. And rest in peace, Hulk Hogan.